The blood barrier that was around Jiang began to become more intense, causing all of his blood to slowly start coming out of his body. He began to look at his hand and his eyes filled with confusion and fear, as he did not know what kind of spell this was. As the smoke curtain from the insect bombs was disappearing, the figure of Xiao Yuanchen became visible. He started staring intently at Jiang with a murderous gaze, clenched his fist tightly, and used the ability called Compress Blood. At that moment, Jiang's blood began to shoot out like jets from his nose, eyes, ears, mouth, and nails. Seeing this, Jiang was shocked and his eyes filled with terror. He knew that this was not good. Uncle Jai Gang realized that if this continued like this, something bad was going to happen. He tried to act but was unable due to the barrier that Jiang had created around them. He could not help but despair and began to hit the barrier with both fists. He knew that this was his fault for having allowed Jiang to enter the Tanjiao camp. But fortunately, Gu Kaishan and Hong Yao were not going to allow this to happen. Both jumped, drew their weapons, and prepared to intervene. Seeing this, Luo Sandao and Mu Hankyu, who were worried about him, also filled with courage. Both jumped and began to advance towards Jiang as they were not going to allow him to die. But just before they could make another move, some ropes made of energy appeared and wrapped around their waists, leaving them immobile. They were somewhat confused as they did not know what was happening or where these ropes had come from. The ropes brought them back to the floating island. The man with pink hair put his hands on his hips and mentioned that jumping to rescue Jiang in a situation like this was seeking death. The other man who had summoned the ropes and was standing next to him simply remained silent. Luo Sandao, who fell on her butt on the island, realized that the gray-haired man was her father, while on the other side, Mu Hankyu, who was lying next to her, turned around and realized that the other man was her grandfather. Mu Hankyu stood up, and with a desperate look asked her grandfather to please save Jiang Chen. Luo Sandao did not fall behind. She also stood up, turned around and with a firm look asked her father if they had any treasure that could save Jiang's life. Luo Sandao's father did not lose his composure in this situation and with a calm look replied that they had no treasure that could save him. Mu Hankyu's grandfather began to look at her and with a sincere expression mentioned that once the forbidden curse of blood explosion affected the opponent, all that was left was to wait for death. The one who had cast the spell was Xiao Yuanchen, so all they could do was watch. The king of the celestial sword and the others had gone to save Jiang. Now all that remained was to see if they could negotiate with Xiao Yuanchen to spare Jiang Chen's life, something that was not going to happen since he wanted to avenge the death of his two grandsons at all costs. While Xiao Yuanchen was flying in the sky and had his fist clenched with which he was controlling the blood spell, Gu Kaishan appeared, began to draw the sword with his hand and ordered him to stop. Hong Yao, who was flying next to him, started shouting, called Xiao Yuanchen an old bastard and ordered him to undo the spell. Of course their plan did not work. With a sincere look Xiao Yuanchen revealed that there was no more time. As Jiang was about to explode, he was relieved as he would finally be able to avenge the death of his two grandsons. Seeing that the persuasion plan had not worked, Gu Kaishan drew his sword and launched a powerful cut towards him, thinking that he was seeking death. Upon seeing this, Hong Yao decided not to stand idly by. She unsheathed the scythe, used the technique called Blade that opens the sky, and launched a powerful cut towards him. But just before the attack could hit, Xiao Yuanchen used his power and created a powerful water barrier called Flow that softens the hard, which stopped the attack without much effort. While with one hand he was holding the sword, he turned to Gu Kaishan and admitted that his sword was good and also asked if he really believed that his sword would be a rival for him. Gu Kaishan put his hand in front of his face, started staring at him and decided not to give up. He wanted to see how many more attacks he would be able to block. Hong Yao gripped the sword tightly, causing a powerful orange energy to appear around the blade. With a look full of determination, she decided to smash this guy along with her master. At the same time, the blood spell began to take effect more and slowly the energy barrier started to get smaller, causing intense pain to our boy. In a matter of seconds, Jiang lost a lot of blood. He put his hands on top of his head and began to scream in pain. Upon hearing his screams, Hong Yao's and Gu Kaishan's attention was focused on Jiang. They panicked as they realized that this was not good. Xiao Yuanchen began to observe Jiang and seeing that he had reached his limit and was about to die, he couldn't help but smile and mocked Gu Kaishan asking if he wasn't going to hurry up to say goodbye to his dear apprentice. His eyes filled with joy. With a penetrating look he clenched his fist tightly and used the blood explosion skill. At that moment, Jiang began to lose even more blood, which started to condense inside the barrier causing it to begin to contract. Due to the pressure, not long after, Jiang's body began to grow larger, until several seconds later, a great explosion was created, which created a curtain of smoke in the sky. Upon seeing this, Uncle Jai Gang was shocked and could not help but start crying. Auntie's eyes filled with tears. She could not believe that Jiang had died. Gu Kaishan was left speechless and his eyes filled with terror upon seeing that his beloved apprentice had died. Hong Yao, who was next to him, could not help but start crying, even though she had not known Jiang. For her he was like a little brother. Luo Sandao and Mu Hankyu were shocked and terrified at the same time. With a desperate look, Mu Hankyu thought this was impossible, and she came to the conclusion that Jiang was joking with them. Luo Sandao did not want to believe that he had died, so she thought she was right since Jiang always used to joke. Xiao Yuanchen, who was wielding the sword with one hand, raised his head and started laughing like a madman, and told his grandson Xiao Beihan that Grandpa had avenged his death. While he was enjoying this moment, Gu Kaishan began to advance quickly towards him and filled with courage. Even if he had to risk his life, he wanted to kill Xiao Yuanchen at all costs. Hong Yao also began to advance towards him. She was not going to let her master act alone. She firmly believed that together they would be able to kill this bastard. Upon observing this, Du Yunfeng's eyes filled with fear as he realized that a death battle was about to begin. He explained to the god of war that if he did not intervene soon, the south of the Yangtze River would fear for its life. The god of war thought that he was right. In the blink of an eye, Gu Kaishan and Hong Yao reached Xiao Yuanchen and prepared to attack. But at that moment, the god of war used his powers, causing a powerful energy to appear around their bodies, leaving them immobile. Hong Yao tried to move, but her body started trembling, while on the other side Gu Kaishan made no movement. Xiao Yuanchen tightly grasped the sword and remained silently observing them. The god of war mentioned that although they wanted to have a decisive battle, they could not fight here, so he suggested changing places to fight. At that moment, poisonous mist began to appear and Jiang's voice started to sound. He did not want anyone to intervene in the battle that the two of them were going to have. Upon hearing his voice, Xiao Yuanchen turned back, and upon seeing the poisonous mist, his eyes filled with confusion and many questions. He did not know what was happening here. Not long after, once the poisonous mist began to dissipate, Jiang, who had previously died in the explosion, appeared and started staring at him intently. Upon seeing that Jiang was alive, Gu Kaishan and Hong Yao were shocked. They did not know how this was possible. With a serene look, Jiang asked old Xiao if he really believed that he would kill him so easily, revealing that he had many more cards up his sleeve than he imagined. Xiao Yuanchen began to observe Jiang with an incredulous expression. He did not know how it was possible for Jiang to be alive when he had just seen him die with his own eyes. Bai Feng started to sweat and many questions came to his mind. He did not know if Jiang had any other type of hidden power. Jiang Wushuang, who was standing next to him, was stunned and his eyes filled with surprise upon seeing that Jiang had resurrected from the dead. Luo Sandao and Mu Hankyu fell to their knees on the ground, began to hug each other and could not help but cry out of joy, and thought that Jiang had just been joking. Chu Buling was stunned and realized that Jiang had the aura of the dead, which was the effect of the undead metal. Yu Xiao clenched her fists, began to observe Jiang with a joyful look, and couldn't help but smile. She confirmed Chu Buling's words, explaining that it was the metal they had obtained earlier in the village of the dead. According to her, it had an incredible effect. Jiang extended his hand towards the sky and began to release poisonous mist. Now that Xiao Yuanchen hadn't been able to kill him, he decided it was his turn. He gave the order to all the insects to come out, and in the blink of an eye, the sky was filled with hundreds of thousands of them. Xiao Yuanchen began to look up at the sky, and upon seeing so many insects, he realized that this was a calamity. He could not believe that Jiang had dared to use this. While the insects were flying through the sky, Lingqiu, who had his arms behind his back, mentioned that the number of insects was absurd. Jiang Xuanji remembered that Jiang had just changed jobs. He did not know how it was possible to form so many insects in such a short time. He began to observe Jiang and with a confident smile admitted having underestimated him before. Upon hearing this, Lingqiu's gaze also fixed on him. With a smile, he realized that Jiang Xuanji had made a decision. Xiao Yuanchen decided not to stand idly by and began to release energy to repel the insects. Jiang Xuanji decided to bet everything he had since he also wanted to fight against Jiang until the end. He asked him to turn Xiao Yuanchen into dust. He started showing 2 fingers and with a determined look used a forbidden spell. But just before he could use the spell, the god of war used his power and a powerful energy appeared around Xiao Yuanchen's body. He tried to move but was unable. He did not know why the god of war was doing this. Jiang decided not to waste this moment. He began to control the insects, making them start to approach him, creating a bunch of small explosions. Upon witnessing this, Mu Hankyu could not help but be astonished. According to her, it was strange since there was no reason for the god of war to help Jiang. Her grandfather began to observe Jiang and with a smile mentioned that the reason behind this was very simple. With a smile, Jiang extended his hand towards him, causing all the insects to start moving towards him. Her grandfather explained that people who possess calamities were too cautious to risk fighting someone like Xiao Yuanchen. But nevertheless, Jiang was different since he had raised hundreds of thousands of insects in a very short time and his talent was incomparable. And such an existence was enough to make him different from the rest and nullify all the rules. She understood that showing the calamity had not been reckless, but intentional. The hundreds of thousands of insects began to explode near Xiao Yuanchen. With a look full of rage, he mentioned that all of them must die. According to him, the people of Daxia deserved death. The explosions slowly began to consume his body, causing him to open his mouth and start screaming in agony. He asked Jiang not to think that he would be able to finish him off so easily, revealing that he still had an ace up his sleeve. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.